Hello and welcome to 20 Lore Pro. Thank you so much for joining us here today as we watch the Hunter Burton Memorial Lorcana Championship. This was the second annual event, the 11th year for the Hunter Burton Memorial itself, and we are so thankful that 20 Lore Pro was invited back for this year's tournament. This year we had over 70 competitors compete in the Lorcana tournament, along with many side events and freebies that were raffled and given out all throughout the day. We want to thank our Enchanted Level sponsors Cloud Collectibles, Random Encounter Games, The Card Haven, Pixelborn, Mothership Books and Games, and Pixel Haven. Thanks to them and many within the community, we were able to raise over $7,500 to support 988, the U.S. National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you or a loved one are experiencing suicidal ideation or are going through a mental health crisis, reach out to 988. There's support available 24/7, and there are professionals who want to help you find the right resources that you need. Again, this is 20 Lore Pro, and I'm Sir Ashtown, and thank you so much for joining us. We also want to thank Miguel over at Diamond Ink Apparel for doing the beautiful artwork on the Lorcana Championship playmats that you see before you on the tournament screen. If you want to get yours non-serialized, you can head on over to 20lore.pro to our merch section. Also, there will be a link in the description to get yours today. We want to thank GFQ for printing those playmats and for being a long-time partner alongside 20 Lore Pro. Thank you, GFQ Underground, for printing those mats. And here we are going on to the next round.
All right, we are back with the next round. We're jumping right into game one here of this next match. I'm Liam from the Limiteers. I'm joined here by Loaf.
Hey.
I'm in the booth for the first time.
Yeah, first time. It's glad to be here, Liam.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I know you've been saying you really want to jump in here, and I'm super excited to commentate with you. This match is going all right, and it's an interesting matchup for this meta. I haven't seen actually either of these colors on stream. We have on the one side Lemon Lime over there with Joe. That's the colloquial name for Amber Emerald. And there's a bunch of different forms that this deck can take. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then on the other side, it's my favorite color combination, Emerald Amethyst. I love this color combo. It's a deck that's been good since set 1. Not so good in set 2, but good again in set 3, and then been in and out of the meta since then. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see this go.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup, and Emerald Amethyst is a deck that for me hits really close to home. It's my favorite color combination. It's something I've had success with, and really seeing it paired up against Hyper Aggro, we're really gonna have to pay attention to see if he's able to draw his foxes. Maybe he's got some crabs in his list that'll help him offset some of these 4 willpower characters. Looks like we have a Nala and a Piglet in play right now.
Yeah, that's right. So this is an interesting color combo. This is a deck that was in and out of the meta for a while. It actually did very well in Toronto in this kind of off meta when Bucky got banned, and then actually got Clara Sear qualified for North American Continentals with an aggro version of this in Vegas. I believe it was the DLC. So what's interesting now about the meta is there's some great cards that came out in Arcasia's Island, including Lady and Tramp and some other cards, which leaned a lot of people into this Tramp build, they're calling it. But I don't see any of those cards here. So this may be more of your traditional Lemon Lime aggro, perhaps an Under the Sea splashed in. It should actually be pretty good into the Emerald Amethyst matchup, I think. So we'll see how it goes. 2 Piglets on the board, though, will each have 3 lore, given that there are 3 characters on the board. So already fast lore total start for Joe.
Yeah, Amber Emerald really up to a fast start here. And very interestingly, on the Amethyst Emerald side, we see Beast being inked. So the 6-drop Beast, anytime an opposing character takes damage, it's able to ready.
Yeah, that's a awesome card. Actually, I played against a Beast Relentless deck in 3 sets ago. It's a great card that can close out games quickly because, as you said, whenever it damages, you can quest with it. So you can quest for 4, 6, 8, a bajillion cards, or a bajillion lore in a turn with that card if you set it up right. One thing we will note, let's take a look at Rourke over there. Great card into an aggro matchup. When it comes into play, you give a chosen character Reckless, but then more importantly, when you're playing against hyper aggro, whenever one of your characters is banished into challenge, your opponent loses one lore. Lore loss is not something that we see in very many cards in the competitive meta. There's just not a lot of them out there, but Rourke is a card that became splashed in to deal with aggressive decks or even some of these mid-range Emerald Amethyst decks a few sets ago. And being used to great effect here to kind of tamp down on that lore gain across the way.
Yeah, and this is really big for Trevor here because not only is he going to be able to prevent that piglet for questing for 3, but it's actually forced unless he wants to make a different challenge to challenge into that Ursula, which we see him doing right here.
Yeah, challenging into that Ursula. We saw that little token there indicating it had a Reckless, and then we'll lose another lore. It feels good to control the board a little bit, but not when you're trying to race ahead and not when you're losing lore for it.
I'm a big fan. And, you know, Lyle was a card I used to success in Toronto, and honestly, if Trevor ends up playing a John Silver, he'll just have my heart, you know, just like that.
All your favorites?
Yeah.
I do love John Silver. A card I'm surprised we haven't seen it with the pirate synergy in more like pirate builds, but here we have Rourke doing some board control of its own, challenging into that piglet, and then being bounced. We was like, where are the damage counters? That doesn't matter. It's being bounced back to hand. An enchanted Ursula there going into the Inkwell, and now the Snake, the only card on the board for Trevor, as he passes the turn back over to Joe.
Yeah, and although we don't expect Hyper Aggro to be doing a lot of challenging, depending on what Trevor's hand is, he might really value protecting that Lyle Tiberius Rourke to play it again later. Giving Joe an opportunity to eliminate it from the game and eliminate that loss of lore is something that Trevor's going to have to be conscious of, and both players are really going to have to be conscious of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's starting to get in dangerous territory here, though. I mean, 9, 10 lore, that area doesn't feel like a lot sometimes. 10 lore is a lot to try to close out the game, but with all the high lore questers in Joe's deck, we're going to get to the point where Trevor's going to have answers every single turn to deal with some of these cards. Joe now with that Prince Philip being played. It's a 3-2 with Ward, but 2 lore. Again, getting closer to victory. The Snake going in, challenging the Piglet, removing that 3 lore quester from the board. And I'm guessing we might see a Rourke here again. There he is. Coming in, old Lyle Tiberius.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, cannot target that Prince Philip with the ward. So just a free, well, not a free, but 2 lore that can't be interacted with for Joe.
And with nothing exerted, there's nothing to challenge into. So that Ursula is just going to have to sit there, not questing, probably not singing. So just left, unutilized this turn. The Nala will quest for 1. And Joe choosing to protect that Prince Philip there, making it not vulnerable to the crackback. And then a Daisy Duck dropped for turn there with that 2 lore as well. So going up to 10 with the Nala.
Yeah, and this is really what Lyle excels at in these game states is you might look at the board and think, wow, Joe can quest for a lot, but he would lose his Philip, lose a lore, so he would net 1, but then he would be behind on board and still facing down whatever Trevor has in his hand. It looks like Joe's only down to 1 card left in his hand.
Yeah, that's the thing about hyper aggro. You want to dump your hand. That's the game plan, but you can run out of gas pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of these hyper aggro lists play characters with 4 willpower, mainly to deal with that bell opening that we're seeing in Sapphire Steel. But here we're seeing the crabs really offset the math of the 3 strength characters being able to challenge into cards like that Nala that we just saw go down.
It's a great point. So now we have 5 lore on the board on Joe's side, but one of the things with this deck is, there we do have a new card from Azurite Sea.
That is the Tramp, and this card, which we will get up here in a second, it is cost 1 less, originally 7, but 1 less for each character you have in play, and you are able to draw a card for each other character you have in play, and then discard.
Now this is a great ability. On the one hand, you look at it as a way to filter and look for the cards you need, and that is important when you're digging for certain cards. But what we see in these new Lemon Lime decks, particularly in this meta the last couple of weeks, is a certain card get worked in for the mid and end game. A certain card, which has been around for a while, was popular for a little bit, disappeared for a while, and that card is Chernabog. Chernabog is a card that gets cheaper for every character that you have in your discard pile. It's a 9/9, which quests for a lot. Is it 4 and 3? And it's a way to close out the game. So when you're filtering your hand, it's even better when you can dump characters into your discard pile in order to make Chernobog free.
Yeah, and so some interesting things to call out from Joe's discard pile. He does have that Lilo, which can be brought back during the start of his turn, and he also does have that lady that we were talking about in the beginning of the game, which allows you to get some of those cards back from your discard pile, which is essentially drawing 2 cards in the right situation.
Absolutely. So here we have the other tramp, the little baby tramp. This tramp, I believe, it gets an extra lore if you have a lady in play. Am I correct?
No, it's the other way around. The lady
gets the lore.
Yes, the lady always gets the lore.
Right, and when you play this character, chosen characters get +1 strength. The lady always gets the lore.
It's true. Yeah, so this one actually is just more cost effective with the lady in play.
Right. Lore total up to 13 here.
Yeah, so now what Trevor has to be very careful of, and what Joe is doing very well here, is he almost has enough to quest all the way from 13 to 20 if Trevor's not able to interrupt the questing.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges, in Lorcana, is since you can't challenge ready characters, you need some sort of targeted removal to prevent your opponent from building up that win con on the board, allow them to quest out. Now, there's not a lot of targeted removal in these colors for Trevor. You do have, though, Elsa is a great tool in Amethyst in these color combos, allowing you to exert a ready character. But here's another answer. That work, he's back again, and forcing one of those characters to gain Reckless. It can't be the Prince Philip because he has Ward. No, it's going to be the Tramp. That'll be forced to challenge into one of those snakes. Not only will that banish the Tramp, but that'll banish the snake and knock Joe down 1 lore, and that 1 lore could be all the difference.
Yeah, I am interested to see why we didn't pick the Daisy there, just to prevent the 2 lore gain. I believe off screen we saw a Clarabelle for Trevor.
Yeah, that is a line. It's an interesting choice because you do prevent the 2 lore gain. Here you kind of forcing your opponent to banish your snake and lose a lore. I mean, you do get that back, and it is a little board control. And I guess the Daisy might challenge in anyway.
I see.
So
I've seen this before.
Yeah, and there it is. That's yep. Daisy challenges anyway, takes 3 damage, and then here comes the Rapunzel. Draw 3 cards. There's not a ton of card draw in these hyper aggro lists. You do have the cards, as you pointed out, that pull cards back from your discard pile, effectively acting as card draw. But the big card draw is that Rapunzel. If you can use it for 3 to its maximum effect, it's really good. And there it is.
So not a totally one-sided turn here for Trevor. He did knock Joe down an additional 2 lore back to 11. However, Joe has found that card advantage that he was lacking a couple turns ago.
That's true. Looks like Clarabelle going to challenge in, finish off that Daisy between the Clarabelle and the Crab. And Joe finally on the board with 1 lore. Sorry, Trevor finally on the board with 1 lore. Back over, throw another card in the inkwell. We are going to play another Prince Philip. And another Prince Philip. This is what a play. So, I mean, man, with Ward, there's plenty of answers that Trevor has, with things like Elsa, with things like Work to force things to challenge, with things like there could be Mother Knows Best in here to bounce cards. But those have Ward. Joe can sit those cards there all game and wait for him to build up, the winning lore total on his board, and then just quest out if he wants.
Yeah, and here we are. And there's Donald Duck to gain additional lore.
Oh, yeah.
To get him to 20.
Wow, that Donald Duck with the reach pushing him. Wow. All right. That closed down quicker than I thought it was going to.
I thought Trevor was going to be able to start climbing back in, and we saw Joe go wide, and he found that extra lore from the hand with Donald Duck. And that's always the worst part about seeing Daisy on turn 1. Because eventually you're going to have to deal with her boyfriend, Donald.
They travel together. Oh, yeah. Man, that fascinating. This card, one of the things I love about set rotation, or when new sets come out, is, everybody gets hyped about the new cards and what new tools they get for their decks. But then sometimes it is also fun to look back and see what old cards get made better or now have more utility
Right.
based on what comes out. And this Donald Duck has been around since set 4. And it worked its way into some decks, but I don't know. Look, have you seen Donald Duck played much on the competitive scene?
I haven't seen it played
in meta?
much. I actually did play it myself back in Vegas when we thought the meta was going to be primarily Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire. So we were playing a very low to the ground hyper aggro deck. So it does provide reach in Amber decks, which typically don't have a way to gain additional lore. You have to have a character ready to quest to actually gain anything extra. But I really like what Joe's done with his deck because he has a few cards that get faster with the new synergies. That new Tramp card we saw costs 1 less. But other than that, it seems like all the new cards that he's included in his list either draw him a card directly or have some sort of discard synergy that would allow him to gain advantage that way.
Yeah.
And I mean, Prince Philip, on paper, it doesn't look like that exciting of a card, but it was exactly what he needed to push through to the end of that game.
2 lore with Ward is, it's kind of brutal. Another card that's been in and out of the meta, it pops in and out, and appeared in some Ruby, some Emerald, Amethyst lists near the end of the season. But these cards, they're good aggression early. With 2 willpower, banished pretty easily. But really, any card with Ward is really effective sometimes in the end game when you're trying to scratch out those last 4 or 6 lore. It's a card that you can plop down. Your opponent can't challenge it. They can't deal with use any sort of removal. So unless your opponent can win the game, that card is going to quest next turn. I used to play Kuzco's in set 1 for that very reason. It was a free 3 lore almost every single time.
Yeah, Kuzco was a card, and here we are jumping into game 2, starting off with a Clarabelle for Trevor. Let's see what Joe has to start off his aggro deck.
Yeah, it's fun. Clarabelle, great card, and it also it makes your opponent have to respect the shift line with that Clarabelle as well. It's a fine statted card for early game. What it's really in the metaphor is, to be a shift target, but also that item removal against those item behemoths that we see running around right now. Of course, not a lot of items in Joe's deck, probably not any. But here we have on Joe's side this 04 stat line, which you highlighted last game with that Nala. We're seeing a lot of these 4 willpower early game cards pop into the meta for some very specific reasons.
Yeah, against the Sapphire Steel Bell start, a 3/3 that can come down potentially on turn 1, it has very little options to deal with the character with 4 willpower. And as we saw in that game 1, Joe is able to use Rapunzel to take that 3 damage and actually, punish his opponent for being able to deal that to his character.
Yeah, and also in this set, we got, it is unfortunate sometimes to have 0 strength in your stat line in the early game. You can't do any sort of offense, but we did get cards like Tramp, which can provide extra strength to your characters, and so a little extra utility for those 04s. But here, this is the start I think that Trevor wants, getting a high-statted character that can challenge things, and then getting that work on turn 3. I'm willing to bet that in the hand-altering phase, he altered pretty aggressively to try to find one of those, because getting those online, before turn 4 or 5, or the end of turn 4 or 5, I think is key in this matchup for him.
Yeah, and such a devastating start to see out of Trevor for Joe. Unless Joe has a way to have Lil Jon deal with Madam Mim, that Piglet is going to have to challenge in.
And it's not what you want to do.
We could see the new Tramp
I was
card
going to
for
say,
the trade, yeah.
Maybe the Tramp comes in. That'd be a fun interaction, but again, it's one of those things where I think Trevor's kind of okay with that. Even if that trades, and all Joe is doing this turn is putting a 1/3, and here we actually see that exact interaction. So now we're going to trade with the snake. Like, that feels better for Joe rather than losing the Piglet just outright. But if all Joe's done on his turn is plop a 1/3, 1 quester on the board, not advancing that lore advantage much. So I think that buys Trevor more time.
Yeah, I think on the bright side for Joe, he does have the cards that we highlighted earlier, like the 7-drop Tramp, like the Churn and Bog, that he could eventually just go big in this game. And so now I think it's on Trevor to actually put the clock onto Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can force the hyper aggro deck into the control roll, get it off the beatdown roll, I mean, that's really where you want to be, and that's where the scales really tip. A goat being played here in the mid game. Interesting play here. I mean, it does advance the lore total a bit. Starts to indicate the beatdown roll, but to me, this is not a card you usually want to play in the mid game. Usually, it's more more ink more often than not, because there's other things you'd want to be doing. But in this scenario, it does give 4 strength, so we can get rid of that Little John and trade with that. It's a lot of people overlook sometimes. It's a well statted, like 4 strength on turn 3 or 4 is oftentimes a fairly decent body and can do some board control. I'm willing to bet that's what it's going to be used for, or that was the purpose here. And there is that Donald Duck coming down with Bodyguard.
Yeah, and like you said, it's very important to be able to challenge on the board, and that's what this Merlin play is doing for Trevor. And while we've highlighted all the new cards and old cards that have gotten better with time, we see Trevor pretty much just playing with the classics.
Right?
He's got Merlin, he's got Lyle, and he just actually inked I believe it was the Mystical Rose, into the inkwell.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's funny. I think a couple sets ago, or like last set, Kendall Burdett went into a new format with the exact same deck from the previous meta, and then won a fairly big tournament. So it is fun. Sometimes you see the new tools come out, you've got your favorite deck, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna keep rocking this, and sometimes it works out. It's certainly working for Trevor in this tournament.
Yeah, and glimpsing at Joe's hand a little bit, it does seem like we have the Daisy there on the far right, and that might be the Chernenbog in the...
You would love to drop that as early as possible, force Trevor to devote a ton of resources into dealing with it. Of course, Trevor, knowing that Chernenbog is likely in here, probably looking to hold a crab if possible. Here we have the Tramp challenging in, finishing off that goat. There'll be another lore for Trevor. And again, that Daisy Duck is, that 4 willpower is pretty high stat, difficult to remove unless you have a goat on the other side. And we're going to see that here, where the Elsa comes down, exerts the Daisy, and then we're going to challenge into it with the goat. And yeah, the offensive power of the goat being highlighted here against these 4 willpower characters.
Yeah, Joe really just has to figure out how to break this board state in his favor. I liked that previous turn. He sent the Tramp in to deal with the damaged goat. That Elsa, unfortunately, putting him back on the back foot. But here we see a Dale. And now this card allows you to put cards directly from your deck into your discard pile, which just furthers the synergy. You're looking to maybe put a Lilo in there that you can bring at the start of your turn, or fuel that Chernenbog.
Yeah, you're just dumping characters into your discard pile here to so we watched way back in the day in DLC Atlanta, we watched Josh Polt carry in a Amethyst Amber deck that really used Perditas and several other cards to fuel the game's mid and late game by pulling things out of the discard pile. And when we talked to Polt, he basically said, yeah, my discard pile is my second hand.
Yeah.
I'm just building resources there to use later. And that's exactly what this deck is trying to do as it cycles these cards, is build that the resources in the discard pile to use them later on. You don't need a hand if you can pull Lilos out and if you can use the cards there to play Chernenbog for free.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trevor, with a second Elsa, just continues to go wide, giving Joe little room to breathe here in the second game. I think we're really going to have to see something big like the Chernenbog, maybe some Go-Go Tomogos to get him back in that lore game.
Yeah, it's tough here. One thing I will note, I can't see Trevor's hand. One of the things that this Amethyst deck needs to kind of fuel itself is to try to hit rabbits in the mid game and other cards trying to keep that hand size going. We do have a sizable inkwell over there for Emerald Amethyst, and I haven't seen rabbits. We haven't seen much card draw. So that is one way you get back into this, is forcing Trevor to continue to build a board rather than leverage card draw, and perhaps you then go wide. But it is a challenging board state for a hyper aggro deck to deal with. We do see indicating that the Prince John here wanted to challenge, but Trevor pointing out that those Elsas have evasive and so can't be challenged. And here's the Lady, again, pulling cards out of the inkwell. So again, highlighting the fact that is a second hand almost. 2 daisies coming out, back into the hand, and then the Prince John will. I'm sorry, not Prince John.
Little John.
Little John. The other John. The smaller of the Johns will quest.
So, interestingly enough, 2 daisies going into the hand of Joe, which is an interesting choice. And I wonder if Joe actually does have that Chernobog and is trying to get the important cards out of his discard so they're not shuffled back into the deck.
It is possible. You know, those daisies are, a lot of people think about them as early game aggressive cards, and they are, and they can do some damage early on. But we do see a lot of players that use them, or another way to use them is for end game finishers, where you force your opponent to deal with a lot of your other threats, and then because they cost 1, you know, you can play 3 or 4 big threats at the same time, like 2 daisies, something else, you know, and force your opponent, put like 5, 6, 7 lore on the board all in a single turn, and force your opponent to answer that or lose the game. So they're not a terrible card to have in hand because you can drop many of them at the same time, forcing your opponent to have the answers in the late game. And so, yeah, I think you're right. Perhaps we're saving those, getting those out of there for that play later. And you called it. There's the Chernobog.
Yeah, so we actually see both players building up their board here. Trevor extremely wide, and evasive seems to be the name of the game. He's got 2 Elsas, a Genie there, and even a Tomogo right there at the top of the camera. I expect from Joe we'll just see the 2 daisies complement this Chernobog.
Likely. And then, you know, one thing we'll note too, you know, counting the cards in the discard pile, most of these builds run nothing but characters. No songs, and I don't think we've seen any from Joe, so every card in the discard pile is useful Chernobog food.
Yeah, Joe opting to quest with the lady here. Once again proving the lady does get the lore.
The lady does get the lore. Bringing it back for Joe. We'll see if Joe managed to snag a crab. I think he'd love to have one in hand. Fortunately for him, though, like if he has to do with his Chernobog straight up by challenging, he's managed to assemble quite the board, running, you know, a goat there in, a couple Elsas, Genie, like all those. We'll be able to deal with that Chernobog while having some leftovers.
Yeah, we just saw Elsa seeing friends on the other side, and looks like Goat is going to go ahead and trade with that lady for a +1, -1 lore exchange as well. Just the Lyle handshake.
Oof.
And here's the big beast that
Oof.
we saw inked in game 1.
This is, oh, yeah. So now Beast, of course, can quest every time a character is damaged. It readies again. So quest for 2, and let's do the math here. You have that Chernobog there. Now you challenge in with an Elsa. You ready the Beast, challenge for 2. You challenge in with an Elsa, ready the Beast, quest for 2. That's 6. Challenge with a Genie, quest for 2. Challenge with, so you can close this out easily with that Beast alone. That is a beastly card to play at this point in the game.
Yeah, and Joe has pretty much one option to get out of this game, and I think we're about to see it. Which is, yep, a concession out of this game.
You set that up really well. I was doing the math. I'm like, what is it?
He was really slow rolling with.
Yeah, there's nothing to be done. I mean, the board was bad enough, but that Beast was really the...
Yeah, like you said, all of your 1-questers that are able to challenge are essentially converted into a 2-quester, and I mean, it was unnecessary, but it was more than to put Trevor over the top.
A win more card in that scenario, as you like to call him. Wow. Yeah, I mean, great game there. I think these decks, I think they're I don't know, I would call these fairly evenly matched. The play draw is so huge here. And then the other piece is, you know, for Trevor, there are certain key cards that he wants to find. There's certain cards that are useless for him in this matchup, like the Ursula Deceiver. And then there's certain key cards that he wants to look for, like that Rourke. And if he finds those cards, it's a definite edge. If he doesn't, you know, the edge goes a little bit to Joe. But then the play draw here is so huge. So huge.
Yeah, one thing that I'm curious to see going into game 3, one thing that can really help you break the serve or break the play draw is this Madam Mim Fox that we have on the screen, which we haven't actually seen out of Trevor yet.
That's true.
It's able to deal with Little John. It's able to deal with Nala. It's able to deal with Daisy. It really is a one-stop shop for challenging into Joe's board.
And it allows you to use your characters pretty efficiently too. You can do things like, let's say you establish a snake on turn 2, you challenge with the snake, get a couple damage counters on it, bring it back, and then play it again later. And so even though you're accumulating damage on your characters while doing your control-y things, being able to bounce and then replay them allows you to maximize the use of their willpower.
Yeah, and mulliganing in this matchup seems very streamlined for both of these players. Both of them have Ursula Deceiver in their list, and with the exception of Friends on the other side, that is either getting inked or shipped to the bottom of the library at the altar stage.
Yeah, definitely not a tempo play for Joe, that Deceiver. So one that I'm sure that he'll want to shift away with the limited targets available, and Trevor likewise. We'll see Joe here waiting for Trevor to finish up the altar. Are we? Yep. Shift 3. Shift 3. It's an indication to me he probably, I didn't see the full hand, probably has the Rourke. Again, on the draw specifically, that's a card you really want to find as soon as possible. I mean, both abilities so brutal in this matchup. One, forcing your opponent to challenge with a character instead of questing, perhaps removing that character, but at the very least slowing him down. But then that extra passive ability of that lore loss as your characters are banished are, I don't know, both of those abilities are good. Together, it's just, it can be backbreaking when you're trying to race ahead.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite cards, and just to see it being showcased here really makes me glad. And we see a Nala coming down for Joe on turn 1. Not the ideal start, but still a resilient 1-drop coming out of his list.
Yeah, it should be able to quest for a few. I think probably you want the Daisy. Magic Broom is the answer here on the other side. Not a super well-statted card, but a card that can net Trevor another card if there's certain things that he's looking for. Also a snake bounce target. Anything you establish on turn 1 is that, so...
Yeah, sometimes when you are on the draw with these Amethyst decks, it's very important just to have a character on the board that you can bounce. Maybe we'll see a second 1-drop come out in lieu of a 2-drop for Trevor, but here we see the Piglet, which is the ideal 2-drop out of Joe.
Yeah, this is the 1, 2, 3. And again, it highlights the importance of Nala, too, because having that, one of the ways around Piglet is to banish that 1-drop, get that off the board early. But that 4 willpower is, there's nothing to be done at this point. So that Nala will stick around. That Piglet, almost guaranteed to quest for 3 next turn.
Yeah, and you brought up the importance of the play draw in this matchup. In the previous game, we saw Piglet on 2, but it was answered very swiftly with a Rourke.
Mm-hmm.
And this game, it's either questing for 3 or... Well, it's going to quest for 3.
It's probably going to quest for 3. Yeah, no, it's a great point.
Trevor mulling over his decisions. I don't know if we've seen a 2-drop outside of the Snake and the Ursula. Oh, we did see the Go-Go, which could impact the board a little bit.
That's true. Instead, we do see that extra 1-drop here. It's that Clarabelle. Again, useful to banish items. No items in Joe's deck. Shift target for the Clarabelle. I don't know if we're running the top line Clarabelle. I haven't seen it yet, but nevertheless... there. So let's see. We'll definitely see, I think, a Deceiver going into the Inkwell there, which makes sense.
Yeah. The opportunity. And there is the low drop lady.
There we go.
Now this lady gets an additional lore when she has the tramp with her. But really just an excellent wide start for Joe.
Yeah, we'll see. You highlighted the Fox last... between games. That's definitely, we see it in hand, so that's available. But ideally here you'd love to be able to do some work with these characters removed, but these are not well-statted characters, so you may see some damage put on the Nala and then likely the Fox to remove the Piglet. Really want to get that 3-lore Quester off the board, but man, Joe gonna be able to drop more characters, and just wide board's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, and typically you'd like to see these 2 characters maybe put 2 damage on Nala, but then you were walking straight into a Rapunzel play, which we saw in game 1. Trevor does also have the option to, if he thinks he can get a little more longevity out of his deck, you know, maybe play Lyle this turn. And no, but we are going to go with the Fox.
Get rid of that. Get rid of that Piglet. Yeah, I do think in that scenario, I do think if you have the Rourke, you play the Rourke. You get rid of the 2 lore off the Piglet anyway. But if that's not an option, Fox, not a terrible play here. Slow things down just a little bit. There's that Tramp. We have the Lady Tramp synergy that you mentioned. So not only will Lady get an extra lore, but Tramp is a little bit cheaper. Lady and the Tramp obviously enjoy hanging out together.
And here we see a quest for 4 from Joe going up to 9. And really using the Tramp, and you can see it's synergized with Nala there, but it also do the same thing with Lil Jon. He's able to use those 04s to challenge when typically they're not able to.
Mm-hmm. It's a great, great sequence there.
And as scary as Joe's starts is in this game, it'll be interesting to see the longevity, because even if these Lilos are in the discard pile, they're able to come back.
Mm. Yeah, this is just tough. I do think, you know, if Trevor's able to come back from this and kind of stabilize the work, would be great to have. We keep talking about it, but it is a way to slow this deck down. Instead, we do have the Clarabelle here, seeing that again, and there's the Rourke. It'll be able to slow things down a little bit. We're going to give Reckless 2. It looks like this exerted Lilo here. And then the Brooms will put 1 damage onto the Lilo. So now this Lilo will be forced to challenge in and banish itself, as well as banishing the Broom. Of course, you could clean up that magic Broom with something else, I suppose, but then you're forcing multiple characters to challenge instead of questing. So that's the calculus there. And there it goes. We'll see the trade. And 1 lore off the board for Joe. So that Rourke, I mean, doing work here. Board control as well as knocking the lore back a little.
Yeah, it was interesting to see there. You could have opted, as you said, to send the Tramp in to deal with the Magic Broom. And the downside of Reckless, if there's nothing to challenge, is just no questing allowed.
Mm-hmm. So it is interesting because you lose a lore off the challenge there, but you save the lore by questing with a Tramp instead of challenging. So kind of a net 0, I guess, lore loss there. Going up to 14. Now there's Bodyguard coming down, though, so you do have the high lore Lady and the high lore Lilo as well, but that Bodyguard there are going to protect him.
And there it is. That's the top-end Clarabelle you were bringing up.
The shiny version. The perfect answer for that Bodyguard there. That'll open it up to now being able to challenge that 2 lore Lady. So there I mean, that's the answer to that Bodyguard. And now Lilo doing her thing, escaping from the discard pile.
Yeah, so we do see Trevor set up for the first time this game a significant board that Joe has to be conscious of. But with only 6 lore to go, we got to see what Trevor is able to make happen. And even something like another Tramp could just take this Lyle off the board and make it a non-issue.
We are at the point now where there's several like high-end options like the Clarabelle available to Trevor. You know, Elsa is sometimes running these colors. We know that Trevor's running that, so that's an option. But man, Trevor just has to have, you know, multiple answers every turn because every single lore here matters. There is the Elsa.
Yeah, I mean, what a great answer you were just talking about looking for. And what will be turning sideways? I would presume the other Lilo. And yep, just getting as much lore off the board as possible.
Yeah, it is tough, though. I mean, you're right. I mean, you have to get those 2 lore characters off the board, but you send them in the discard pile. It just feels bad, though, when you know they're probably going to come back, and you're going to have to spend another 2 characters next turn dealing with them. But, you know, able to establish a character on the board and challenge with it. I mean, look at the way these board states have swung. That's a key 2 turns there for Trevor with that shift and the Elsa. All right, another high willpower character there. There's Lilo staying in the discard pile. Another note here, another problem with these hyper aggro decks too is in Lorcana, your characters are also your resources. So when you're prioritizing lore gain and dumping things on the board, sometimes your resources suffer. And Joe's sitting with 3 ink in the inkwell there compared to 6 over there for Trevor at this state in the game.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, we've seen Joe flipping back and forth that same card in his hand for a while. I wouldn't be surprised if it's that uninkable Chernobog. It looks like he's 1 character off in the discard to be able to play it.
I think that's a good bet because I think if you're looking at closing this game out, forcing Trevor to run a bunch of characters into Chernobog is what you want to do, and that might explain why those Lilos did not, in fact, escape from the discard pile last turn, prioritizing the Chernobog over getting them on the board.
Yeah, so and like we talked about in the pregame, this Fox has just done a tremendous amount of work. We just saw it reset the Lyle there with a couple damage on it. We saw it take out the Piglet in the early game. It's really the perfect card in these Amethyst decks for breaking that play draw pattern, especially in the 2-game format that we're so used to.
Right. Now, if that Chernobog is in hand, okay, we do have it. I was going to say you can run a character in to get that extra character in, but we don't need to. We're going to ink instead that Tramp, send everything from the discard pile back into the deck, shuffle that up, and get that Chernobog there.
Yeah, and so unfortunately for Joe, the only legal challenge for him is that 0-4 into that Clarabelle.
Yeah, and Clarabelle, remind me her strength again, because
she is, I believe, a 5/6.
Okay, so yeah, so it's interesting because if you have to challenge into the Clarabelle anyway, that Prince John does become an extra resource for you in the discard pile, meaning you don't need to ink. So just another consideration there if you're playing this line yourself later on. That is a note.
Yeah, I think looking back at that last turn, we maybe could have played because the ink for the turn was the 7-drop Tramp, so we might have been able to just discard enough cards to play the Chernobog for free.
Yeah, multiple lines available here. That Chernobog definitely changes the calculus, but we're gonna quest for 2. Now that Chernobog, perhaps if you draw into the card that gives you the 1 extra lore there, that Donald Duck represents game on board. So definitely something Trevor has to think about.
Yeah, and taking a look at the lore totals right now, Trevor's only at 4. He's got a long way to go before he is in striking range. We did shuffle back those Lilos that we had with the Chernobog. Got to see what answers Trevor has in hand. Another bounce would be fantastic to reset the Lyle again. Maybe another Elsa.
I mean, assuming the bodyguard isn't drawn, and yeah, another Rourke pulling something into the challenge. We are going to exert the Chernobog though, so here we go. We may see some cards run in, and some well-statted characters though. You can do this fairly efficiently with a few cards, and then of course, it feels bad to run into Chernobog of Bald Mountain there, but when you're forcing Joe down a lore each time you lose your own character, it doesn't feel quite as bad.
Yeah, looking at the state here,
I mean,
I think your only option is Clarabelle and either a Fox or 2 Elsas.
Yeah,
it is up for the Fox.
Yep, and Joe will lose 2 lore, and oh man, that Elsa, what a critical card to have there.
Yeah, and this Amber Emerald or Amethyst Emerald deck really doesn't have many options for interaction. I mean, we brought up the Mother's Knows Best, which doesn't appear to be in this list, but the Elsa is one of the, and there's the
there it is.
Duck.
Oh my goodness, there it is. Oh man, that is. Oh no, man, what a. Oh. Yep.
But once again, Trevor at 4. We've got a long time to get to 20, but with the big Ursula just coming down, I might have just cast or cursed at our friend Joe here.
Yeah, I mean, if you need to get to 20 lore fast, dropping a 3 lore character on the board helps, certainly. Of course, the ability won't come into play terribly much here, but a 4/7 with 3 lore is pretty brutal. But man, I have to go. That Elsa play, I mean, without the Elsa in hand, that really is the only answer to Chernobog there.
Yep.
And that is game. That is, and not only game, that's the match if he does not have the Elsa, because I think that's the only answer.
Yeah, that was the only answer to remove the Chernenbog. He could have, set aside his fate for another turn, but Ursula here, whenever she quests, she's able to exert an opposing character. So, with the exception of Prince Philip, the new ward card that we saw out of Joe's deck, everything will be able to be exerted on Trevor's turn and challenged.
That's true. There is a world in which you just don't have a lot of ink. I was going to say you save the Donald in the hopes of drawing a Prince John and letting it stick on the board for a while, but just not a lot of ink to be able to do multiple things in a turn. And there, as you highlighted, that Ursula questing, exerting, the Ursula there, challenge into the bodyguard, and just serious board control going on here. It's a little rough. Now, a go-go would close things out for Joe, but we haven't seen one from him, and I don't...
Oh, 4 ink being... Dale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good thing to highlight. The go-go... The go-go would finish out this game with that 4 damage on the Elsa.
Yeah, I don't know. I've looked at a few of these tramp lists. I don't know that I've seen go-go in there very often. Some of the decks maybe. Some of them may be running them. But for sure, if it is in there, I mean, we could have a top deck victory here for Joe.
So let's see. Trevor has 4 1-lore characters and 1 3-lore characters. So he is putting Joe on a 2-turn clock here. We'll see if he wants to continue trading. And he actually has the option to get that 4 damage Elsa off the board completely, eliminating the go-go draw. We'll see if that's spotted.
Yeah, well, we're going to do something different.
Even better.
Yep, we're gonna take that damage. We're going to slide it on over. And we're going to probably finish off that day with something. There you go. Yeah. If our record holds, this is the turn Joe draws the go-go.
Yes, we have been doing an excellent job. And
oh, Daisy Duck. All right. Oh man, what a game. I mean, both decks doing, I think, pretty much what they wanted to do. Trevor having that Lyle to kind of slow things down. Joe racing ahead with a wide board early, was able to play the Chernabog. Like, the game plan was intact. And I just want to highlight again, you're right. There's other play arounds. If somehow Trevor's able to banish, something of his own, he can keep Joe off that victory with the Donald Duck. But victory was within Joe's grasp if there was no answer for that Chernabog.
It was, and looking at the way Joe was picking up his cards and talking to his opponent there, it looks like he noticed the trade in the Little John, play the Tramp, and play Chernabog for free, essentially there, which may have put him over the hump.
May have, yeah. No, that is great. One fun interaction I wanna highlight in these decks. We actually saw this in a DLC. I was talking to a player afterwards. If anybody's playing this work package, you're usually playing it, or oftentimes you're playing it with Amethyst. And you're examining your board and trying to find ways to banish your own characters. Banishing your own Madam Mims by refusing to bounce a character is a way that you can trigger Rourke if you have no way to banish your own characters in a challenge. So let's say Madam M Snake, for example, or Madam M Fox. You play that card. You say, I would rather not return a chosen character to my hand, and then that character goes immediately to your discard pile and triggers the Rourke.
Yes.
So those are that is I don't know what Trevor had in his hand, but if there was no challenges available to banish one of his own characters to keep that Chernabog at bay, just doing that is
turning his character into a 2-cost. Each opponent loses the lore.
Right. Well, man, what fun match that was! It was so fun to cast with you. I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah, we'll have to circle back. Get all the critiques in.
Yeah. Go take a look at Twitch chat and everybody there hanging out for us. Thank you all for hanging out with us today here at the Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament here with casting alongside the 20 Lore Pro team. Some wonderful people here. This is a tournament that happens every year in the Dallas area, just outside. It started as a Magic event to honor Hunter Burton, a former pro Magic player, and it's turned into really kind of a gaming convention here with multiple tournaments going on behind me. There's Flesh and Blood out there. There's Pokemon. And for the second year in a row, there's Lorcana run by the 20 Lore Pro team. So if you enjoy Lorcana, you enjoy the competitive scene, definitely put this on your radar for next year. Not only is it a fun tournament with a great field and great tournament organizers, but it's a wonderful cause. So we appreciate you hanging out with us here on stream. And if you're a Lorcana player, we hope to see you here next year.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter Burton Memorial. We're here on day 2 with the incredibly talented Mike, who created the artwork for this year's championship playmat, as well as a lot of the other art that we're seeing at the tournament today. Mike, can you talk to me a little bit about how long you've been involved with the Hunter Burton Memorial and why you wanted to get involved in this amazing cause?
Well, this is the second year. I did the first mat, Simba mat, and then actually I got with 20 Lore, I want to say about a year and a half ago, and they invited me to come to the first Hunter Burton Challenge to design the mat, and then we kind of just grew from there. So this is the second year. I'm very honored to be here, especially for the suicide prevention. That's really big on my book.
It's amazing. You create such powerful artwork for this tournament. I know the Mufasa mat from last year, I think, has been seen at DLCs across the country, and these players will bring that out. This year, tell me a little bit about the signature mat that you created for the event this year.
Okay, so I don't want to take all the credit because 20 Lore team, we brainstorm through ideas and stuff. This is actually my, I want to say 4th time making big art, because you have to kind of make it really big to draw it out in profile. We do a constructive, I guess, criticism. I'll shoot them back and they'll shoot me back with ideas. So it's a whole family process, and I really do enjoy, being to do that. And it's all for donation. I don't, charge for the art at all. So
that's so wonderful. So you're creating, I love how you portray a lot of these Disney characters we know and love. You portray them in this really powerful way. Yes. Were you creating art inspired by Disney before Lorcana, or did you kind of get into it from this perspective?
So I was a tattoo artist back when I was very young. Joined the military, and then I got into Marvel and comics and stuff like that. And then actually with Green and Wesley, and Evolutions. I want to give shout out to Evolutions. That's where I kind of started, the whole family process. But I like to throw my little artsy, dark kind of, because that's what I used to do. I used to do a lot of art for Magic and commissions and stuff. But I like to throw my little flair in there as well.
That's awesome. So do you play Lorcana as well as create Disney-inspired art?
I did play for the first year. It was very competitive. But now I'm just trying to put all my time into the actual art and, just give out to the community. So.
Well, let's see into the future. Hopefully one day we'll see your art on an actual Lorcana card.
Awesome.
If you had an opportunity to make art for a Lorcana card, what would your dream be to do?
Ursula, well, Vanessa and Stitch. Those are my 2 biggest characters within the Disney.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully we will actually see that dream come to pass in the next few sets. Yeah. It was so wonderful to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And like I said, it's very, very humbling to be able to, create this type of pieces for Hunter Burton.
Well, if you haven't seen them yet, Mike's work is absolutely stunning. I think you can also people can buy some of your work online.
Yes.
If I remember.
You can go on to ArtStation, and then Diamond Ink Apparel is actually my t-shirt company. So.
Well, amazing. We'll check out some of Mike's art and support somebody who's doing amazing work for the Hunter Burton Memorial. Thank you all so much, and we'll get back to the feature batch.